Welcome to Behavioral Grooves, the podcast that brings behavioral science to life. I'm Kurt Nelson.
And I'm Tim Houlihan. We like to explore the aspects of behavioral science that will improve your well-being, your relationships, and your organization by helping you find your groove.
In today's episode, we return to a guest we originally met back in episode 302, just about a year ago, Mr. Houlihan. Wow. And because he's done some cool work in the meantime, we wanted to catch up with him.
Yeah, and well, fortunately, he didn't turn us down.
or unfortunately for our listeners, maybe as they have to listen to us more. But anyway, no, Jonathan Malesic teaches first-year writing at Southern Methodist University and creative nonfiction at the University of Texas at Dallas. He's a philosopher and scholar and cares a lot about something we do every week, science communication.
John's latest works, or at least the ones that we wanted to talk to him about, centered on two important topics in our world today. Now, the first one is what Kurt just mentioned, communication. And the second one is a concept called knowingness.
The first is near and dear to our hearts, Tim, because communication is what we do here at Behavioral Grooves Global Headquarters.
Did you say global headquarters?
Okay. It's what we do here at Behavioral Grooves, and more specifically, it's science communication at the multitude of global headquarters that we have in Minneapolis and Charlotte, North Carolina now. So we communicate with people who want to know more about how to apply behavioral science to their work life as well as their home life. And John's thesis about communication focuses on the importance of writing for an audience. And we do this with you in mind, a listener who is curious and interested in using science to improve their lives.
The other part of our discussion with John is about knowingness. Now this term, knowingness, was introduced by writer and philosopher Jonathan Lear, who teaches at the University of Chicago. Lear wrote about this concept in his 1998 book, Open-minded. And it's about how we feel when we hear something new and we go, oh yeah, I already know that. John's latest essay in Psyche magazine explores this concept really well, and we wanted to chat with him about it.
Yeah, I already knew that. That was all. I knew about Jonathan Lear's work, all but before this. But with knowingness is a little bias, a little misconception, and that's not good for a population that consumes world events in headlines rather than paragraphs. And we really enjoyed talking about the implications of this phenomenon with John, and we hope, maybe we know that you'll enjoy this too.
So with that, Groovers, we hope you'll sit back with a little summer pour of your favorite communication hacks and enjoy our conversation with Jonathan Malesic. John Malesic, welcome back to Behavioral Grooves.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's great to be here.
It is so much fun to have you in the closet still.
All right, Tim, you might have to explain that before we go on. I'm sorry. That just, our listeners are going, what?
I think I'm not going to try to explain why John is in a closet. We should let John explain that.
Yeah, this is the quietest and best acoustically best place in the house. I started recording podcasts in my clothes closet one afternoon when we were having siding being put on our house. There was just noise everywhere, and I had seen a veteran podcaster interview me from her closet. And so I thought, okay, well, if she can do it, then I can too.
You can too.
Was that Katie Milkman by chance?
No.
No, okay.
Katie did some from her closet.
Katie did her recordings in the closet as well. So
okay.
All right. I'm sorry. We slowed this down. We didn't even get to our very first speed round question. So Mr. Houlihan, take it back.
It was about a year ago, actually a little more than a year ago, that we first talked, and we were talking about your End of Burnout book, and we asked a question about whether ice cream and beer was a good idea, and you pretty much said that malty goodness combined with cream was pretty perfect. My question for you today is, what's the best beer to combine with ice cream? Russian stout or a nice light lager?
Oh, definitely Russian Imperial Stout is ideal. Or a any kind of like, coffee porter, chocolate porter, milk stout, anything that's got like a lot of malt, and it usually has to have a pretty high alcohol to kind of, well, really, I mean, just for the taste, like just to like, so that it can, kind of stand up to the fat and the sugar in the ice cream. Yeah.
I said that I was going to try this after that we talked last time, and I still have not. So I am going to make this. It's Memorial. We're recording this right before Memorial Day weekend, and so I am going to try this on Memorial Day weekend.
Should we take a break so you can go and get?
I could probably go downstairs and get that, and we could just be, that would be an interesting interview. All right. Without that, we're going to go on to the second question. Okay. All right. John, would you prefer to have dinner with your favorite hockey star or musician?
Oh boy, probably musician. Simply because, my favorite musicians are probably better conversationalists than my favorite hockey stars.
Why would no? All right.
Yeah, I mean, hockey players are not, they're not paid for their words. They're men of action.
That is very
well
true.
Said.
So, do you have a favorite hockey team?
Yes.
Yeah.
I am a lifelong fan of the Buffalo Sabres.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You and the Minnesota Wild are doing about the same then, and
right. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we won't dive too deep into that. So this last speed round question is about a recent article that you wrote. It was in Psyche magazine. Our big problem is not misinformation; it's knowingness. It's a terrific article, and we'll have a link to it in the show notes. But my question is knowingness simply a way to manage the flood of information in our world today?
I think so. And yeah, I mean, I should explain what I mean by knowingness.
Yeah, we should probably go there.
I think that we're all very familiar with it, and we all probably practice it almost daily. It's a term that I don't know if he coined it exactly, but it's a term that I get from the philosopher and psychoanalyst Jonathan Lear, who teaches at the University of Chicago and has written many just brilliant books. And Lear wrote this essay in 1998 or so on this phenomenon that he called knowingness. And it's a posture that you take toward knowledge where you act as if you already know any question that is, that could possibly come up, where you're so afraid of seeming not to know that you sort of pretend to know a lot of things that you don't. And you often kind of pretend that you've already known, you've always already known, and that everyone has already known. So, everybody knows, such and such, when in fact they don't. And it's just I think that there's just so much that we might know in our world. And we have this illusion that, by virtue of having the entire internet at our fingertips, well, we surely, of course we know everything that's on there, but of course we don't. And we have this anxiety over our knowledge that I think we deal with by seeming to know things that we don't.
So, John, is this related to what we commonly think of as like a confirmation bias kind of thing? Is it like, oh, this is familiar, so of course I must know it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that it's a lot of the ailments surrounding knowledge in our society, I think often boil down to knowingness. So yeah, confirmation bias is, considered a huge societal problem, or echo chambers, or misinformation, or, any of these others, or the kind of polarization of our information networks. And I think that deep beneath all of those is a vein of knowingness where we kind of act as if any question of fact has already been settled by, the people on our team often. Oh, well, that's already known. We don't have to look into that.
Are you thinking specifically of like partisan related issues?
Right. Often. Yeah. Though it's often, for one thing, knowingness absolutely afflicts all corners of our politics. And I think that it's a real problem when it starts afflicting people whose job is to inform us. So, physicians, teachers and professors and researchers, and I dare say, not you guys, but podcast hosts.
Thank goodness not us.
Occasionally, podcast hosts seem to claim to know more than they probably do.
Well, we don't know anything, so that's one of those things. I guess we can claim that, but that's about
easy for us to have a beginner's mindset because we are beginners.
So, John, I want to. There's a quote from the article that I really love, and it's this. It's quote: "The stance of already knowing functions as a defense. If you already know, you do not need to find out. Knowingness, then, is a false claim to knowledge that makes it impossible to learn anything new. Knowingness is why present-day culture wars are so boring. No one is trying to find out anything. There is no common agreement about the facts, and yet everyone acts as if all matters of fact are already settled." I love that because it covers a couple different things. One is it's a defense, right? It acts as this element to kind of protect us, so I don't have to look at my internal belief system, and if that is then found at fault, I might have to address that, which I think is great. But it also is this. What I thought was really fascinating was this idea that it makes it impossible to learn anything new. And so, can you expand on that a little bit and just kind of talk through some of that and why that is?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example that I mentioned in the article. And, I think knowingness is particularly a problem for, people who've been rewarded throughout their lives for having the right answer. So, top students would be a good example. And, that was me as a high school and college student. I thought I knew everything. And I thought, oh, of course, we already know that. That question's already settled. But I'll give you, my example is that a few years ago, and it's probably a decade ago, I was sitting at a coffee shop near an elite liberal arts college. And it must have been around, course selection time. The students are trying to figure out what classes to take in the fall. And I remember hearing these two students, and one said just with this distressed voice, I can't take a class in Russian history. I don't know any Russian history.
Wow.
And, I think that's pretty widespread. It's like, well, of course you don't know. You haven't taken a class in it.
That's right. Captain Obvious.
Right. And the student may have had legitimate concerns about their grade. They're like, oh my gosh, am I going to be able to do well in this class? Mm-hmm. And perhaps that's a signal that educators put too much emphasis on already knowing the right answer and rewarding those students who maybe have a little bit more of a background in the subject and not pushing quite enough to treat the class as an opportunity for discovery and growth and all of that.
Yeah, it's fascinating when you think about that, because there's a corollary in business as well. Is, do we attempt something, or do you reward people for trying something, or do you only go about it once you know with a certain sense of certainty that we're going to be able to do it? And I think that decreases the amount of creativity, the amount of, new ideas that get floated and new ways of trying to do business. I think it covers a whole bunch of different pieces of that.
Yeah.
An interesting piece that I was thinking about after reading this article is, what is the role of the internet or social media that has on this idea that, all right, because I think part of this is also this idea of confirming, as Tim mentioned before, the confirmation bias that I have a belief. And in the past, that belief, I might be surrounded by, I don't know anybody else that has that belief. And so I might start questioning that. There's some, everybody else is saying all these other things, but the internet now, I can go out there, and if I believe the earth is flat, I'm not the crazy guy in the middle of the town. There's tens of thousands of other people out there that say the world is flat. And so it confirms my belief, and I don't have to, so I know this, right? I know it's right, and we know it. Is that a part that plays into this, or is that just a happy-go-lucky, by chance of the times we're in? So.
Yeah, I think so. And, I think that the thing that the internet reveals to us, like you say, is that there are all these people out there, and surely there are people who know the thing that you want to know, and they legitimately know it. I mean, think about how you're almost forbidden online from saying, like, holy cow, I just learned this amazing thing. You'll sometimes see, I see people do this, and they'll say, like, oh, I was today years old that I learned whatever. And, I read that and like, oh, come on. Like, you didn't know that? Like, and I shouldn't do that. In fact, there's a really good XKCD comic that I used to have when I was teaching college full time. I had it either, I don't know, taped up to my desk or something like that, just as a reminder of what my job was. And the comic was something like, one of the stick figures is, saying, whoa, I just found out this thing that is actually kind of common knowledge. And, the other stick figure says, I don't make fun of that person. And I'm like, let's go see if it works. I'm going to show you this, And as a teacher, you're teaching people stuff that you, of course, learned a long time ago, and many people learned a long time ago, but is totally new to the students. And I think it's a bad idea to stifle that excitement of discovery. So you put out an act, and you're like, oh, well, what's going to happen if we do this experiment, or we try this thing? You know what the answer is, but the student doesn't. And the student can have that thrilling moment of discovery. And so I think that we, as a culture, need to, give people a little bit more space to experience that and not make fun of it.
Boy, I couldn't agree more. There's a whole culture of that seems to go along with knowingness. It's so easy to shame people that we just don't agree with, of course. And if there's any hint of, no, you're wrong for, actually, I don't even have to explain why. I see social media just making, no, you're just an idiot, period. And it seems to be, I could make the argument that knowingness is in part of that. It also makes me think about cognitive dissonance. You didn't address this specifically in the article, but it just makes me think, is in some way knowingness sort of ameliorates that need for trying to hold those two things that are opposite or different in my head. I just don't even have to worry about that with knowingness.
Yeah, sure. Right. Yeah. Any evidence that is contrary to what you already believe
or
can
no.
be very right. Yeah. Can be right. Well, that's the thing, right? You imagine it's not just as a belief, but as something already known. Yeah. You encounter that bit of contrary evidence and you overlook it easily, or you just dismiss it or something like that. And, I think about, Thomas Kuhn and the structure of scientific revolutions, where in normal scientific research, you operate with a framework of a bunch of assumptions that have worked for years or decades or sometimes centuries. and you see an anomaly, you say, at first, well, I don't know, I'm not going to worry about that. That's just one data point. But you have to, so yeah, it would be a bad idea to discard your entire presuppositions because of one data point. But when they build up, that's when, something revolutionary perhaps is about to happen.
Yeah. Which kind of happened with the onset of behavioral economics. Like, Thaler actually called his first column Anomalies, where he's pointing out troubles with classic or neoclassic economic theory and kept finding more anomalies. There were more problems with this rational man kind of thinking, to the point where it was like, well, wait a minute, there's really something here. Now, I guess that there are still those who dismiss behavioral economics as, just a silly little idea. But yeah, it takes a while to get to the revolutionary idea.
So one of the things, John, that I've been kind of thinking about is, all right, so our listeners maybe trying to think about this and going, okay, so as much as I don't think I participate in knowingness, I might find myself occasionally doing that. So I know for Tim and me, we definitely fall into this. And so what are some ways that we can overcome this? Is there any way, or is this just so kind of basic in our human nature that it just comes about and we can't do anything about it? Or are there things that we can try?
I think that there are things. Yeah, I think that knowingness can be overcome. And as with most things, there's a kind of balance to strike. I think, one alternative approach to dealing with the flood of information and all of the kind of potentially contrary data that comes our way is to be like, well, I'm just going to remain open-minded. I'm going to take everything in and assess based on the evidence that comes before me. And I mean, that too is a kind of distortion, partly because you just can't do that.
I was going to say, that's long.
It's exhausting.
Oh my goodness, you were talking about, oh my God. I'm tired thinking about that.
Yeah. And that's a thing that you hear in, I don't know if people are still talking about it, but in, sort of like rationalist kind of circles, it's like, well, we have to take the evidence for what it is every time. We have to go in without preconceptions. And scientists certainly don't approach their data without preconceptions. They go in with a whole theoretical framework and a whole lot of past experience. So even that approach is not even good science.
So we'll nix that one off the list.
Right. Yeah. Right. And, knowingness has this, Lear thinks ultimately possibly tragic results. His paragon of knowingness is Oedipus. We usually think of Oedipus that, it's come down to us that the problem with Oedipus was, the Oedipus complex. And Lear, in talking to a bunch, it was a conference of psychoanalysts, says, the problem with Oedipus was not his Oedipal urges, but this knowingness, the fact that the play opens and people say, hey, there's this problem. He's like, oh, yeah, I know all about that. Yeah. And it's like, but he doesn't, he has no idea. He can't see the evidence before his very eyes because he became, King Lear is very clear. He's like, he's not really king. He's tyrant, but he became the tyrant of Thebes based on his problem solving ability. He's like, well, I'm Oedipus. I know how to solve problems. I'm the problem solver guy. I'm going to solve this. And I kind of already know. But he can't see that he is the problem. He's become blinded to the evidence before him. So it's hard to say exactly what the right balance is, but it's having a kind of confidence in those well-earned theoretical dispositions that you have, but remaining open to contrary evidence and dissenting voices and things like that. It's just a tricky balance that everyone will work out on their own.
Is skepticism, is that too strong of a word? Would you go so far as to say it's that having a healthy mix of skepticism in your mix would that be good? Would that be healthy, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, kind of, like you say, healthy skepticism, not like kind of Cartesian skepticism where just everything is doubted.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, I am also, a fan of the pragmatist tradition, and particularly Richard Rorty, where Rorty advocated what he called ironism, so an ironic stance toward your own commitments, saying, so it's like, okay, well, these are the things that I'm pretty confident in, but not allowing them to become dogmatic and remaining open to the possibility that those commitments can lead to dead ends. They can ultimately end up serving you very poorly. So that you have to be a little ironic towards your own beliefs.
Can you give an example of that? This ironism, this sounds really interesting.
I guess that, an example could possibly be, say you have some kind of longstanding political commitment.
Okay.
And over time, you begin to see that political commitment, start to lead in directions that are, no longer productive or useful to you or something like that. Okay. Or, it could be like you may have, maybe that commitment is based on, beliefs about the world.
Mm-hmm.
And, like the kind of like rational man example. And you say, in living in the years of my life, I look around and I see that assumption is not entirely warranted. I wish it were true that people made decisions based on, kind of rational self-interest, but they don't. They make decisions based on all kinds of things, emotions or social ties or whatever it is. And, you have to be open to revising that and saying, all right, well, my theory just doesn't work anymore. And you're only able to say that if you already have a certain distance from that theory. If you're just a true believer, you won't even see the contrary evidence that suggests your theory doesn't quite work.
So you have to,
It reminds me of Annie Duke, and when we've talked with her and she's talking about probabilistic beliefs or thinking, this idea that even if you believe something, what you consider almost 100%, if you think about that belief as I believe that 99.9%, then there's that little bit that keeps it apart from my identity. There's that small chance. And even just that little chance changes how we can then process this. So new information comes in that might contradict that. All right, so I revised that down to 99% now, and now a little bit more comes in, and now it's down to 96%. It's still 96%. It's a pretty big, and granted, it's not something where you hold that belief and you're actually going, all right, I'm a 96.2% as you're thinking it, but just that idea of being able to come in and not have it be that this becomes part of one's identity, that there is always that element of being able to hold something out, so that contrary, that irony that you've mentioned, I think could play into that. I don't know if that aligns with what that you were saying, but it's what came to mind for me.
Yeah, and as an educator, something that I think a lot about and I've been reading about lately is how students can transform. I think that the justification for going to college is that it's a transformational experience. You will go in one person and leave, somewhat different. But you have to be open to that transformation. And, well, not everyone is going into college. And so you have this conundrum or this paradox where somehow, in order to get you have to figure out how to transform someone who's not open to transformation into someone who's open to transformation
Wow.
so that then you can transform them. And I think that, maybe Rorty's kind of ironism is another way of addressing that paradox. How do you get someone to change their mind, or how do you change your mind? Well, you kind of have to have that tiny bit of yourself that already is not 100% convinced.
Yeah. It's like the Mark Twain quote about how I was so surprised that the years that I spent in college, my dad got a lot smarter.
Yeah.
That as, in this character, he wasn't modifying his own worldview. He was just surprised that, he wasn't taking into consideration his dad was already really smart. It was just like, all he was doing was saying, well, my dad must have gotten smarter while I was away at college, even though the transformation was in him. So so there are those, I guess there are those that are just not interested in updating and their own belief system.
Yeah. I want to talk about another article. So we've, and obviously we can come back to knowingness and different things, but you also wrote another article in The Atlantic called, What ChatGPT Can't Teach My Writing Students. Can you just give a quick synopsis of that for our listeners about what that was about and, kind of the thesis around that?
Yeah. The background of that essay is just it's fair to call it a freak out among.
You heard it here first, folks. Right. John freaks out.
Not John, everybody else.
Not just my own, but just, among educators at the secondary and college level with the availability of ChatGPT and its other kind of large language model competitors. Because you could give ChatGPT a prompt, and you could just give it the prompt for your, English assignment, and it would return an essay that was usually not brilliant, but certainly competent. The prose was clean. It had the basic, it made the basic kind of moves that we expect students between like grade 10 and, most of college to be able to do. And, the question is, why bother? What are we doing? Why bother teaching students to write anymore if AI can do at least some of the tasks? And it occurred to me, one thing that's valuable about learning to write is you learn to write for a specific audience. So you construct the person or group that you're trying to inform or persuade or amuse or whatever in your head and try to, meet their needs. And that imaginative act of creating that the reader, I think, is an essential psychological move, not just for communication, but for our entire ethical lives. And so I think that there's, learning to write is an ethical training too. And the first step is, imagining the person that you're trying to write to.
Yeah. Yeah. Which makes me think about all the papers that I wrote in college. And I feel very disconnected from an audience other than how can I in some ways persuade my professor to give me a decent grade, to somehow demonstrate that I'm, that ultimately I felt like my professor was sort of my reader, was my audience. But you're kind of arguing that the professor shouldn't be the audience.
Right. And as a writing instructor, I'll give the students, their essay prompt. It's like, okay, imagine you are writing for a smart peer who's not in this class. So they haven't read what you've read. They haven't had the discussions we've had. So you're going to have to inform them, but you're going to try to, persuade them according to whatever methods are persuasive, to someone, about your age. But I'm not sure that the students buy that because, like, the fact is, the reader is still me. The reader is still a 47-year-old with a PhD and who is going to be grading them.
Yeah.
So I think it's really tough to get students to train that imagination, because I have to adopt this persona that, maybe I'm just not very good at doing.
Well, there's an incentive for the student, right? The incentive is to write to you because you're the one who is in control of that grade that they have. And so as much as you say, write it for, your smart peer, yeah, they might even try, but in the back of their heads, there's something that's kind of keep coming back. But I need to make sure that my professor, really gets this in various different pieces. Right. The interesting piece on this for me was this idea that, learning how to write teaches you certain things about yourself, but also about, the way you think and other, and how others think, and being able to put yourself in their shoes, and also how, all of those factors. And for some weird reason, Tim's heard me talk about this analogy on others, but it kind of goes back, in, Apocalypse Now, right? Francis Ford Coppola, they did a documentary called The Heart of Darkness. And in that, Francis Ford Coppola is having this conversation with Dennis Hopper, who is obviously high as a kite and is just like, dude, just doing the whole thing. And Francis Ford Coppola is going, you need to learn your words. You need to learn the script. And he, and Dennis Hopper goes, but Brando, ad libs all the time. And Francis Ford Coppola goes, he says, but he knows the script. He knows what he's supposed to say, and he is ad-libbing from that knowledge. And you don't know what you're saying, and you're just ad-libbing. And I'm paraphrasing that, of course. And I don't know why this reminds me of this, but it's kind of like you need to understand how to write and how you do that. And then, all right, ChatGPT, if you need to use it or whatever, that's fine. And in whatever you do, but you need to have that basic understanding first before any of this other stuff can come through. And I don't know if that makes any kind of logical sense, or if I'm just off on my little tangent, which I often am. So
yeah, it does make sense. I mean, it's all about the moral imagination, and yeah, it's something that actors have to do all the time. They have to imagine their way into another person's existence, perhaps a fictional person, perhaps a real person, and they have to, portray that in some way. And I think that we do that all the time. I think that we're always, from something like driving in your car. I mean, this is kind of, I don't know, like this is like theory of mind. Listeners can mentally correct me if I'm wrong about this. But yeah, you're driving in your car and you're like, what is this person doing? You have to be like, okay, you imagine yourself in their car doing these things like, oh, okay, they're trying to merge, or they're trying to go across two lanes, or who knows, something like that. I think that that's to me a really fundamental part of the moral life. And it's something that I think is actually becoming more important to our moral lives in the 21st century.
Wow. God, I feel like that was just there's no follow up to that. That was just so beautifully said. I'm sorry. Like I'm a little bit stopped in my tracks as I loved it. I do. Thank you for that, John.
Yeah, sure.
But what, we talked a little bit about before we started recording. You mentioned that you've got some stuff in the works. Can you share a little bit with the groovers as to what's on John Malesic's mind?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's still more to be said about burnout. And I don't think I've written much about burnout lately, but I probably will. And I've been doing some speaking about burnout primarily to academic audiences. But beyond that, over the last few years, there's been this undercurrent in my thinking and my writing about exactly this question of how we relate to people that we imagine. I wrote an essay a few years ago about regret as a relationship between you and your past self. Of course, your past self is gone, doesn't exist, but you have to recreate that person in order to regret and come to terms with that. I wrote an essay about trying to think my way into my father's final thoughts on his deathbed.
Wow.
I wasn't with him at the time, and my kind of access to his mind was this apparent selfie that he took. It was this shocking discovery on his phone that he took the day before he died. And, there I'm trying to reconstruct, my father's mind. And then, at the end of that Atlantic piece, I mentioned how the big ethical challenges of our century involve how we relate to people who we can often only imagine. So you think about climate change. Our actions now affect people who don't exist yet.
Wow.
Or climate refugees who perhaps have been born, but we have to imagine, well, what are their desires? What are their circumstances? Or artificial intelligences or non-human animals. What does this species how can I relate to that? I have to imagine a state of mind there. And so I think that's kind of what I want to give more thought to. And that can sort of get back into some of my previous academic interest in theology and stuff like that.
Maybe a slightly more philosophical bent.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
I love that.
It's fascinating because, and again, obviously you put a lot of work into this already, a lot of thought into it already. And, just in you talking about that, the hardship of having to be able to do that is already apparent, right? I mean, we all bring our own past, our own, systems of belief that we've already talked about, this knowingness idea, and to really be able to have that empathy to sit and to be in somebody else's shoes, or in another, even beyond somebody else's shoes, into something, as you said, animal or AI. That seems like it's a task that seems pretty Herculean to me, almost, to a degree.
Yeah, and you sometimes hear people dismiss others' actions by saying, oh, that's just projection, or, you're making this about yourself or something like that. And sometimes, what else do we have to go on?
Yeah.
If we have no idea what someone else's desires are, we got to think, well, what would my desires be in that circumstance? And maybe that's the best we can do.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to whatever comes out of this, because this will be very exciting. So,
and we hope you'll come back and talk about that project when it comes to fruition. But
sure, I'd love to.
But right now we do have to get back to music, and we need to.
we never started on music, Tim, so we can't get back to music. Okay. You gotta.
I was hoping you'd just play along with that. John, let's imagine that you're stranded on a desert island for a year. You get to take 2 musical artists' catalogs with you, the whole catalog, everything that they've ever created, recorded, whatever, with you. But you only get 2 artists. Which 2 would you take?
Wow. I mean, one that jumps to mind, and we talked about him last time, is Neil Young. Partly because his catalog is so vast,
large, diverse.
I would probably not quickly get bored. And I think that, another interesting aspect of that is, like, because his career has been so long, I can sort of, if I'm on this desert island for a long time, I can kind of age along with Neil.
Interesting.
I like that.
That's kind of cool.
Like
okay.
Yeah.
That's a novel thought. Okay. Who else?
Yeah. The other one, oh my gosh, this is tough. I'm trying to think about, artists that I find, just kind of endlessly re-listenable. I don't know I'll just say, like, another artist who I like a lot. And I think that there are there's a lot of re-listenability, although the problem is the catalog is not that big. It's Fiona Apple, who, puts out an album every like 8 years or so.
Right. If that.
And, and, I don't know. I mean, I think that the lyrics, and, her songwriting would give me a kind of, maybe slanted perspective on my environment that I would really need on that desert island.
So. Interesting.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. I think that's a really cool set of picks. There are so we've asked this of several guests, and oftentimes they're really diversity seeking. They want to have a classical and a jazz artist, or a jazz artist and a pop artist, or something, just to really sort of, this is like, okay, if I'm picking my candy bars at the beginning of the week for what I'm going to have throughout the week, I'm going to choose different candy bars. But in reality, if I pick one a day, I pick the same damn candy bar. I like your rationale. I like the aging along with Neil. That's a really cool way of thinking about it.
But I mean, there are those artists who we have kind of that we've seen them from when they were very young, aging through, their 20s to their middle age into, later years in life that are still producing new works. And it is interesting sometimes, I think, to watch that progression, both from a musical style and kind of technicality, but also in their lyrics, particularly if they are, like Neil is very, purposeful in thinking through the lyrics that he writes. And so the topics that he wrote about and how he wrote about them as a 18, 19, 20, early 20s versus somebody in their 60s and 70s, I think is a really nice juxtaposition of kind of looking at our world and thinking about things. So I fully support that. And I love Fiona Apple. So there you go.
John Malesic, thank you so much for being a guest on Behavioral Grooves again.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome to our grooving session where Tim and I groove on what we learned with our discussion with John, have a free-flowing conversation, and talk about whatever else comes into our all-knowing brains.
Yeah, all-knowing and already knowing.
Oh, we knew that. You knew that I was going to say all-knowing. That's like just a given.
I think everybody knew that.
It is this concept of knowingness, which I absolutely enjoy and love because I see not only others doing it very easily, but once John started talking about it, I'm realizing, oh, I do that as well. It's not immune to my own way of thinking. It's like, oh, I knew that. I knew that was going to happen.
How many times have you been in the meeting and someone in the meeting says, well, what we discovered was this. And somebody says, well, didn't we already know that? And you're kind of going, well, of course we already knew that. Didn't we already know that? Everybody knew that.
It's funny because I have a client right now I'm working with, and we're putting together a survey. And yeah, we kind of know that this one question, what the answer is going to be. But to that degree, it's like, why do we have this question in here? We know what everybody's going to say. And I go, but we don't. Yes. We assume we know what everybody's going to say. And yeah, it probably will turn that out, but let's make sure. Let's not just guess about this.
Bravo, Dr. Nelson. Bravo.
Lord knows if I'll still get it in or not, because I haven't gone back and had that. But that is it's one of those pieces, and knowingness isn't necessarily that, but knowingness is more about that idea of, oh, you said something, and it's like, yeah, I knew that, this idea. But I think what was interesting for me is that it almost comes across as we have to state that we know it, because otherwise we have a perception that people are going to think we're dumb. We're not knowledgeable. And this idea of not knowing means that you're stupid. when in fact, I think not knowing is one of the best things that we can know about ourselves, is because that way it helps us to say, this is all these new things that I can now learn and build into, who I am.
It also, for me, connects to the Google effect, this idea that whenever we want to clear up a particular fact, we just go to Google, ask Google, and Google gives us the answer back. And oftentimes in my mind, there's this, oh yeah, I just wanted to tweak that answer just a little bit, but I knew that already. And I think that this is a really good thing to be aware of. This is a really important thing for us to keep an eye on, so that we don't lose sight of having sort of a learning mindset and have an openness to learning new things, to revising our own opinions on things. Holy cow. If we already have this sense of, I know that, it removes any sense of curiosity.
And again, I go back to Annie Duke. I don't know. We ought to just pay her royalty, because I go back to her every single time. It feels like this idea, though, of having that thinking in bets, that probability perspective when you're thinking about something, as opposed to being 100% certain. I'm 85, 90% certain on this. And that way, when that new information comes in, I don't have to go, I knew that, and it's there, but I can go, oh, that's new. Now I can adjust my idea of, am I 70% certain now, or am I 90% certain?
Yeah. Well, and John talked a little bit about maintaining healthy skepticism as well. And that's like, this comes up all the time. Like some of the best behavioral scientists, let's just start with Kahneman and Tversky, were the ones, they question the man. Right? Right? They
question the man.
They question the man. And I think that having a healthy sense of skepticism can lead us to being a little less dogmatic. I think that there's, at least there's that possibility.
But, and we talked about this too, but staying open-minded is exhausting.
Oh,
right?
Yes, that's right.
I mean, that's the hard part about this, because we all want to have that sense of being open-minded and considering all of the options and various different pieces, but sometimes you just have to satisfice, right? You got to do, some of this element of saying, nope, this is the belief already, and I don't need to keep re-examining that. But there is that element of having that healthy skepticism that I think is really important as we move forward. And the idea of making sure we're not being dogmatic in those things that we hold as truths.
Yeah.
So,
is there anything that you wanted to say about communication specifically? Because we did spend a little time on communication.
Just this idea, I was really fascinated by John's take that ChatGPT won't become a substitute for writers in the same way, because ChatGPT doesn't have empathy.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an interesting twist, right? He said, you can create a visual image with like a AI kind of piece. But again, is that going to be the same as a piece of writing that's supposed to touch on empathy? And again, at this point and in the immediate future, I agree with him. I'm interested to see where technology is going to take us and what that means for communication. Because pretty soon our jobs are going to be gone here, Tim. We're going to have two bots that are going to be, here we are talking with John Malesic. I don't know. But yeah.
The other side about the importance of writing in communication is that it helps crystallize our thinking. That it helps us actually articulate our thoughts, so it's not just random blah, blah, blah. That when we start writing, it becomes a little less random blah, blah, blah. And
so we should write out some of the stuff that we do here, because we just are random blah, blah, blah.
Overrated.
What else, Mr. Houlihan? What else?
Could we just spend just a minute on moral imagination?
We can imagine it. Sure.
John talked about this at the end. He gave the example of what it's like to be thinking about someone else, having this moral imagination, or he kind of parallel to theory of mind, right?
Yeah.
And when he gave the example of driving a car and you think that that's when you're driving down the road and someone's coming in from the right and you think, well, they need to merge. So my theory of mind or my moral imagination suggests, oh, they need to merge. So I'm going to allow them in or whatever. We do that automatically. But then he went a step further and just kind of teed up this idea about what would it be like to think about our actions for people who haven't even been born yet.
Yeah.
And that was just a cool question that got me thinking about what would it be like for me to talk to my great, 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 great grandchild 100 years from now? What would that
couple 100 years from now?
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. However many generations.
Do the math.
What would that conversation be like? Like if we know that context matters, context is a big part of how our world works. What would I have to impart to somebody 100 or 200 years from now that is my lineage that I share DNA with that could either help them along their way or help them navigate their life? I just think it's a interesting idea.
There's all that work on temporal discounting. And this idea that we're so now focused as opposed to future focused. And I know there's been that research that reimagines our pictures and images so that we age. And so that changes our perception. But I love this little mind game that you can play about what is the conversation that you would have.
Let's call it a thought experiment. It sounds better.
Thought experiment. Okay. This thought experiment of having a conversation with a great-great-grandchild, some such in some future time frame. And there's a piece of this too that you can reverse that and go and say, what would it also be like to have the conversation with your great-great-great-great-grandfather or grandmother? And what wisdom can they impart to you? And what is that continuation? And it's so interesting in these times. And I can't remember who we talked about this with, but this idea that you look back at history, and if you could have plunked somebody from 1200 AD and put them into 1600 AD, and they would fit pretty well into that world. Not a ton of change, even from 16 to 17 to 18. All right. You're getting a little different. All of a sudden you're getting machines and different things. But then you go from like the 1890s up until, today. And
radically different world.
1850s, right? To today, it's a vastly different world. And I can only imagine that the world is going to go through this in the same level probably as is kind of currently happening. And that to me is just like, we can't even imagine what that great-great-grandchild is going to be in. And then just the idea of, again, like the moral indignation that we have on slavery today, back in 1800s, for a large portion of the United States and for maybe the world, that wasn't an issue. There wasn't any part. Granted, there were people that had that component, but we look back on those people saying, how could you not know this? And yet, what is the things that we won't even know, that our great grandchildren will think about us?
Yeah. And yet we read Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, Aristotle, Hume, we read things that were written 200, 500, 2,000 years ago. What is it that we might have to say that would be relevant and meaningful to somebody,
what are those
future generations?
What are those human universals that, regardless of the technology and societal kind of components around us, are going to be true?
See, you often say you're not so philosophical, but damn it, you're pretty damn philosophical.
I talk the talk, Tim. I but then it just hurts my brain. So then I quit because it hurts, man. It hurts to think about these things. There's an interesting aspect of that though, because thinking hard about these answers or these questions that don't really have solid answers. I think a lot of philosophy is there are some pieces that you can look at elements, but a lot of the philosophical questions are almost these things that are unknowable, right? Essence of life, those types of things. And it's hard. Cause you can have an opinion. And if you're open-minded, like we are, right? And you're not dogmatic about, well, meaning of life is 43 and here we go. And this is how it is. Then you have to have that open, and it's exhausting and it's tiring and makes my head hurt. So.
Okay. Agreed.
All right. Well, I think I've philosophized enough. Is that even a word? Philosophize? I can't remember. All right. I think that wraps up the topics that we wanted to group on. Let's just cut it off before I dig a deeper hole.
All right. So, listeners, we hope that you give some consideration to John's comments and maybe even our grooving ideas about knowingness, and that it helps you go out this week and to find your groove.